Welcome to Forbidden Files. Before 1938, almost nobody in America bought a diamond ring to propose marriage. It was not a tradition. It was not an expectation. It was barely even a common idea. By the end of the century, 80% of American brides had one. The diamond did not become valuable because it was rare. It became valuable because one company convinced the entire world it had to be. And that company controlled so much of the global diamond supply that it could decide, almost by itself, what a diamond was worth. The story begins in 1871 with an 18-year-old Englishman named Cecil Rhodes. He had come to South Africa to work on his brother's cotton farm. The farm failed, but nearby, something extraordinary had just been discovered. Diamonds, enormous quantities of them, buried in the earth around a town that would become known as Kimberley. Thousands of prospectors flooded into the area. Small mining claims sprang up everywhere, each one independently dug, independently sold, completely uncoordinated. Rhodes, sickly, ambitious, and patient, began doing something almost nobody else was doing: buying up claims, one at a time, slowly consolidating what had been a chaotic free-for-all into something he could control. One at a time he could control. By 1888, Rhodes had succeeded. He incorporated De Beers Consolidated Mines, named after the farm where the first major diamond deposit had been found. Within 2 years, De Beers controlled approximately 90% of the world's diamond production. Not most of it, nearly all of it. One company, one man, controlling the global supply of one of the most desired substances on Earth. Right now, it's medium pause. But owning the mines was only half the strategy. In 1889, Rhodes negotiated an agreement with the London-based Diamond Syndicate, committing to sell a fixed quantity of diamonds at an agreed price. This was the real innovation. De Beers was not just mining diamonds. It was deciding how many would reach the market and at what price. During the diamond price slump of 1891, instead of selling more diamonds to cover losses, De Beers reduced supply. Prices stabilized. The principle was established. Scarcity was not found in the ground. Scarcity was manufactured in a boardroom. Rhodes died in 1902. He was buried atop a granite hill in what is now Zimbabwe, a site he had named World's View, overlooking the African plains he had spent his life trying to control. He left behind a company that controlled the most valuable gem trade on Earth, and a man waiting in the wings who would turn that control into something far more sophisticated. Ernest Oppenheimer joined De Beers' board in 1926 and became chairman 3 years later. He had built his own mining empire, the Anglo-American Corporation, and understood something Rhodes had only partially grasped. Controlling supply was not enough. You also had to control demand, and in the early 1930s, demand collapsed. The Great Depression devastated the diamond market. Global demand fell so dramatically that De Beers was forced to close several of its mines entirely. The company that had spent decades manufacturing scarcity was now facing an entirely different problem. Nobody wanted to buy what it was selling. Oppenheimer needed a solution that mining strategy alone could not provide. He needed people to want diamonds in a way they never had before. Open Yaris, Open Todd moved. In 1938, De Beers hired the American advertising agency N.W. Ayer & Son. Their assignment was almost unprecedented in the history of marketing, not to sell a specific product, to create an entirely new cultural expectation. From nothing, the agency's research found something striking. In the 1930s, only about 10% of American engagement rings contained a diamond. It was not yet a tradition. It was barely even a preference. Medium pause. N.W. Ayer's strategy was extraordinary in its ambition. They placed diamonds into Hollywood films, lending their most valuable stones to movie studios in exchange for featuring them prominently in romantic scenes. They worked with magazines to publish articles about engagement traditions among royalty and the wealthy, always featuring diamonds. They were not advertising a product. They were manufacturing a tradition and inserting it into popular culture as if it had always existed. In 1947, A copywriter at the agency named Francis Garrity wrote 4 words that would define the company for the rest of the century. "A diamond is forever." The phrase was deceptively simple. It linked the physical durability of a diamond, one of the hardest substances on Earth, to the emotional permanence of marriage. It suggested that love, which was not symbolized by a diamond, was somehow less eternal. Advertising Age would later name it the best advertising slogan of the entire 20th century. It links the entire Psychodurette's Georgian Baker. The campaign worked with a speed and completeness that surprised even De Beers. Through the 1950s, the company's advertising linked diamonds to the comfortable, affluent suburban lifestyle that post-war Americans aspired to. By the end of the 20th century, approximately 80% of American brides received a diamond engagement ring, up from roughly 10% before the campaign began. An entire cultural expectation, invented, marketed, and installed into the popular imagination within a single generation. De Beers did not stop at convincing people to buy diamonds. They told people how much to spend. Advertising campaigns suggested that an engagement ring should cost 1 month's salary. Later, 2 months. In some markets, eventually 3. There was no economic logic behind these numbers. They were marketing copy, presented as social expectation that millions of people internalized as an unwritten rule they were somehow failing if they did not follow. Medium pause. The company kept inventing. The eternity ring for wedding anniversaries. The trilogy ring, symbolizing past, present, and future of a relationship. Every occasion in a romantic relationship became an opportunity De Beers had identified, and a diamond product had been designed to fill it. As one industry observer later noted, most people only get engaged once. If diamonds were going to remain profitable, new reasons to buy them had to be continuously manufactured. If diamonds were going to remain profitable, new reasons to buy them had to be continuously manufactured. Behind the advertising was a supply control system of remarkable sophistication. De Beers created what became known as the Central Selling Organization, later the Diamond Trading Company. Only a small, exclusive group of approved buyers, called sight holders, were permitted to purchase rough diamonds directly from De Beers. At its peak, fewer than 200 companies worldwide had this privilege. If an independent mind attempted to sell diamonds outside De Beers' control, the company had options. It could pressure them to join, or it could flood the market with similar stones, crushing the price until the competitor had no choice. During periods of oversupply, particularly during the Great Depression, De Beers purchased and stockpiled diamonds from other producers at premium prices, simply to keep them off the market. The company was not just controlling its own production. It was actively managing global supply as if the entire diamond industry were a single corporation. For most of the 20th century, that was functionally true. In the 1950s, the Soviet Union discovered massive diamond deposits in Siberia, a potential threat to De Beers' global control. Instead of competing, the Soviet government agreed to sell its production through De Beers. A capitalist monopoly and a communist superpower at the height of the Cold War, quietly cooperating to control the price of a luxury good. Ideology stopped at the diamond market's door. The arrangement that had defined the diamond industry for a century began unraveling in the final decades of the 20th century. The Argyle mine in Australia, at one point producing nearly a third of the world's diamonds by volume, broke away to sell independently. As the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, Russia's diamond exports became harder to control. New mines in Canada chose independence from the start. De Beers' market share, which had once approached 90%, began a steady decline. Missale. The legal consequences finally arrived. In 1994, the United States filed Sherman Antitrust Act violations against De Beers. In 2001, lawsuits in U.S. courts alleged the company had unlawfully monopolized the diamond supply, conspired to fix prices, and issued false and misleading advertising. In 2004, De Beers pleaded guilty to price-fixing charges and paid a $10 million fine. In 2008, the company paid $295 million to settle class-action lawsuits over misleading advertising, human rights violations, and price-fixing conspiracy. In 2012, the United States Supreme Court declined to hear a final appeal, and a settlement approaching $300 million was finalized. In 2008, 61 years after Francis Garrity wrote 4 words that changed an entire industry, De Beers officially ended the "A Diamond is Forever" generic marketing campaign. The company's market dominance had fallen from roughly 80% to closer to 35%. The monopoly Cecil Rhodes built in 1888 was, by most practical measures, over. The legacy left behind was complicated. Diamond mining in parts of Africa became associated with armed conflict. Gemstones mined in war zones and sold to fund violence, later known as conflict diamonds. Reports of forced labor and human rights abuses in mining operations followed the industry for decades. The Kimberley process, an international certification scheme, was eventually established to try to address the problem, though critics argue significant gaps remain. Medium pause. But the cultural transformation De Beers engineered has outlived the monopoly that created it. The diamond engagement ring, a tradition that barely existed in America before 1938, remains the overwhelming default today. The company that built it no longer controls the market. It does not need to. The idea it manufactured has become self-sustaining, passed from one generation to the next as if it had always been there. A diamond is, chemically, simply crystallized carbon, the same element found in pencil graphite and the soot from a candle flame. What makes it worth a month's salary is not geology. It is not rarity. Diamonds are not nearly as rare as the 20th century convinced people to believe. It is 80 years of advertising, careful supply management, and a 4-word slogan written by a copywriter in 1947 who never married and never owned a diamond herself. A company convinced an entire culture that love required a specific crystal, and then controlled the global supply of that crystal for most of a century. The monopoly ended. The tradition did not. Perception, it turns out, can be worth more than the stone itself. There are dozens of stories like this one that most people never hear. Subscribe and we'll keep finding them. The next file is already open.